Welcome to the One Hand at a Time podcast. I'm your host, Chris Welton. And today I have another special guest. I know this sounds a little monotonous every time I start a podcast, but someone else I met in a room at a mastermind type of event, and we just hit it off. We had a great conversation, and I knew he'd be a great guest to have on the podcast. And selfishly, this is going to be me asking a bunch of questions about myself, and then we can kind of work through that. But I know a lot of people are in the same boat today. So I want to welcome to the podcast Dr. David Boyd.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, man, I've been looking forward to this for a while. It's as a 51-year-old man who just had a baby. We have a 5-month-old son now. It's just I need to be healthier and live longer. Like that, right? I need to focus on that. So I hope to gain some clarity from you today on some of the things that I'm doing and what I should be. Or we talked briefly before we got on camera about sometimes we don't need to believe what's on some of the social media stuff is more of a sales ploy than it is what's really happening. So I'm just going to walk you through kind of some of the stuff I do to start out, and then you can tell me what you think or your process of that. And then I want to dive into what's working now or what are you seeing in the future and how we look at that. Does that sound good?
Sounds great. Let's do it.
Okay. So I'm a big fan of cold plunge. I have a cold plunge in my garage. I cold plunge probably 5 or 6 days a week. I do it for about 5 or 6 minutes. 47 degrees is where I have it set. So it fluctuates 50 to 45, depending on how hot it's outside. Here in Florida right now, it's extremely hot out. So it's that higher number. I'm not sure what all the benefits are from it. You see things everywhere. It's so great for all these different things. But for me, the benefit I love the most is I hate doing it. So it helps my mindset. Like I have to do something hard in the morning. And I tell people I solve the world's problems when I'm sitting in the cold plunge because the way my brain works and the way it functions, it's like I get out of there. It's like rocket fuel, right? So what's your professional take on cold plunges?
A lot of what you just said. So, it's become a whole industry now, which I think is great. There's some stuff there's some true and false facts about it. Cause I cold plunge also, not as frequently recently, but I do it as well. And so I think probably the number one thing for me, and that what I tell my patients, which just a word on like who I am in my patient population. So I'm Dr. David Boyd. I take care of some of the most prominent entrepreneurs and influencers in the world, and really honored to do so. And so all of these folks, they have, a lot of things in common, both on the health side and health deficit side, but also in terms of personality and what they going to make things happen and not slowing down and pushing forward. And a lot of that has to do with mindset, just like you said, Chris. So when you consider, like when you get into a cold tub that's 47 degrees, it sucks. It sucks bad, especially if you're staying how long, how many minutes?
I go up to 6 minutes sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of time, so when you're in there for that period of time, it's like, that's probably the hardest thing you're going to do that day. Even if shit goes off the rails and it's a stressful, terrible day, it's like, if you've already done something that hard, it kind of puts you in this mental place where it's like, man, what if something comes up, throughout the rest of the day that you have to go handle, it's like, I've already taken care of something tremendous. So you're already in the right, mindset with things. So I think for me, at least, and for the folks I take care of, that's the number one thing. Interestingly, that's not really, especially all the stuff you see, you could scroll on social media like crazy. Either no one talks about the mindset portion of it, or it's very minimal, On more of the health benefit side of things, one of the things that being submerged in cold water for a period of time will do is it boosts our sirtuin count. And sirtuins are these proofreaders that move along our DNA. This was something that it's really was popularized in a book called Lifespan. There's a PhD, his name's David Sinclair out of Harvard, that he has one of the biggest health and longevity labs that there is, and they've made this pretty well studied at this point. But sirtuins are basically these proofreaders that move along our DNA, and if you consider that our DNA at a very simplified level kind of works like a photocopy machine. where it's like it takes a copy of a copy and then so forth and so on. And that's how we make new cells. The problem is, just like if you have a photocopy machine that starts to get old after a while, in my case, a 46-year-old photocopy machine, it doesn't work as well as when it was brand new. And so those copies change over time. It's the exact same thing as we age. As we age, the copies aren't quite as high quality as they were before, and you can have mistakes. Those mistakes can lead to problems. It can lead to cancer. It can lead to other, neurodegenerative diseases, so forth and so on. So it's an ideal thing if we can improve the number of sirtuins that we have to then go and fix those copies and essentially, decrease aging from a cellular level. So that's one of the big benefits with cold plunging and so forth. There's some stuff that says brown fat, that it can increase brown fat production. And of course, brown fat is more metabolically active and everything. Not a lot of data that actually supports that, only because when we're really young, when we're babies, we have a fair amount of brown fat, which makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint to keep us warm, make us more hardy as a baby, just for survival of the species and everything. By the time we're adults, we have very little brown fat, and you can't really increase the amount of it. You can make it larger, so it's not going to make more cells. You can increase the size of the cells, so you can certainly do that, but it's not going to make it larger per se. So that's a little bit of a misnomer that's there. And lastly, one of the things that I found most interesting, because like you, I would just get in, I'd like, let me make it as cold as I can, stay in for as long as I can. At one point, on social media, I was being really macho and like holding up like the chunks of ice, like, look how tough I am. And then there was a study that came out just a couple of years ago that basically said 52 degrees, that's all you really need. And 12 minutes per week is really all you need. So if you do more than that, it's probably not going to hurt you, but how much it helps, probably not that much. It's kind of like fasting in that sense, where it's like you get to a point with fasting where it's like, all right, this really isn't going to do anything anymore. It could even work against you. So, that's kind of the data behind cold plunging.
Yeah, I was so happy when they came out with the temperature was different, because of course when I bought mine, I'm like 35 degrees.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like
right, exactly.
I'm getting it, and I'm like, this is really bad. And then when I saw the difference, I'm like, oh, well, I can do 45 or 47, right? I mean, like, that's great. So again, I do it because it's hard. And I have this whole routine I call the undefeated morning, where I do like 6 different things in the morning. And that's one of the hard things I do. And then I'm undefeated before I even check my phone or my email, right? And you're so right. You can throw anything they want at me. I'm the calm, cool guy in the room. I'm not the emotional guy, because I've already stacked so many wins right out of the gate, and I'm ready to go. So I've wanted to ask you that for a long time. So the next thing is, of course, I wear an Oura ring like a lot of people do. And I've been doing that only for about a month and a half now, because I'm really interested in sleep. Now, my sleep's a little weird right now because I have a newborn son. So that there's always this gap at like 2 a.m. where I'm awake, right? Because I'm helping and those things. But can we talk about HRV and also resting heart rate while you sleep?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So heart rate variability it's an interesting one. It's a good conversation to have. I'm actually really happy that more and more people are looking at it and considering it. Essentially, the way I like to think of it, it's basically the balance between our two main nervous systems. So, most folks, when you think of nervous system, you think of brain, spinal cord, nerves, and so forth. Consider that we have a sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And, sympathetic, you think of more of like fight or flight. So it's like all of a sudden there's a loud bang and you're all of a sudden focused. You're like, what the heck was that? And you're just immediately ready to go. If it's, an intruder coming in that you're going to have to battle for the family, or if there was, a gas main link and you need to hurry up and run out. Versus the parasympathetic is more so the slower things, digestion. Your focus is more so on like your automatic functions, your heart rate, your breathing. So when it comes to heart rate, we often think that it's like we kind of have like this, the heart rate is just always there. The reality of the situation, it's always variable. Because if you could be in deep work on your computer and then all of a sudden your phone rings and startles you a little bit. Well, it's going to spike up and then eventually it'll come back down. When you go to lay down to sleep, it's going to drop further. It's a more of a relaxed state. So there's this variability that's always there. The bounce back and forth between the high and low is really what you like to think of when it comes to HRV. So it's the balance between those two elements of our nervous system. And how much of a bounce there is what can help to decipher your fitness level on some degree. It's not the only way to look at fitness level.
So I want to look up mine from last night. Can we do that real quick? And I can tell you what it
Yeah,
is.
sure.
I've been thinking about
Absolutely.
this call for so long. I'm like, and all my friends are like, "Hey, make sure you ask this. Make sure." Like all these people have been pressing me on what to ask. So my lowest resting heart rate last night was 68 beats a minute. My max HRV was 36, but my average was 15.
Yeah, I mean, and what do you do as far as for your cardiovascular fitness? Do you?
So I do a lot of weight training, but under duress. So like higher, I implement some cardio movements into my weight training. I do that 3 or 4 days a week, and then every day I do at least 45 minutes of either ride my bike or I go for a walk or I get on a Peloton or whatever. I do that as movement every day. I do something to move my body, not as hard as I do the 3 days I lift weights, but the other days I do just regular cardio, ride my bike, go for a walk.
Wonderful, good. That's the key thing is that especially as we get older, our entire body is aging, and the interesting thing is when you start looking at our cardiovascular system. So our arteries are aging along with us. You add on top of that the standard American diet, the SAD diet, if you will, because it's pretty sad. It's more than any other country in the world. We have our food is not great. And there's all kinds of stuff in our food supply where it's incredibly processed and not fresh. So that lends to hardening of arteries earlier on. It leads to cardiovascular disease and stroke and calcifications in those arteries. You add on top of that stress. I mean, as Americans, we work a lot, and then really successful people end up working even more. And when you consider that folks that in higher brackets of income usually take on higher levels of stress, which ages folks even faster. So all these things play a role. And the cardiovascular fitness portion of things makes a big difference in that sense. We haven't been taught that, though. What we've been taught is you want to lose weight, you got to get on a treadmill. And that doesn't exactly equate. It may be that way more so for some people versus another based on their genetics. But deciphering those genetics has been difficult in the past. There's newer modalities now. What 10x Health just came out with their advanced gene test, it actually answers that question, which I'm super excited about. But otherwise, if you didn't know that, you could be doing the wrong type of exercise that would actually be moving you forward. So we're at a very interesting place right now, I think, when it comes to health and wellness. And the fact that people are wearing things like Oura rings or Whoop bands or Garmin watches, and even they're just like getting this data and they're looking at it, even if they don't know what to do with it. I think it's great that they're looking at it because it makes them cognizant of, hey, what am I eating? What am I doing when it comes to my routines? What kind of habits do I have? And when you start paying attention to that now, not only does it move you forward, but especially if you're a parent, that's what actually instills habits that are positive for our kids.
Yeah, it's amazing when you track your sleep numbers and you had a few drinks the night before.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh man, it changes things dramatically.
and you know
Doesn't
what
it?
else changes is I like to partake in an edible from time to time, and
Mm-hmm.
having a marijuana edible. I've done that to get some good sleep, and I slept all night, but my numbers were horrible. Like, they
Yeah.
were so bad. Like,
Yeah. You really, when it comes to sleep, I mean, you can't beat just regular, untainted, pure sleep. Uh, the tough part, there's a lot of folks that struggle falling asleep. Uh, we're all busy. So there's like this constant to-do list that's ongoing in your head, where even you cross things off the list, you're like, oh, there's another thing that got added on. And most of the time, folks are so busy throughout the day that when they go and lay down at night, that's when it's quiet enough that that to-do list just kind of starts going, you know? So on that note, aside from, occasional alcohol, occasional edible, what do you use do you ever use anything to help you sleep?
No, I really don't anymore. I used to for the longest time. I had trouble getting to sleep, and I would take, I would do Benadryl sometimes, or I would do
Yeah.
just anything that would get me to fall asleep. And I have some nights where I'll lay there for a while, and that's what I love, how they track the sleep latency, how long it takes for me to fall asleep.
Sure.
Right now, I don't need that. I don't do it. I'm up super early. I stick to my workout regimen, and I eat about 80% good. Maybe I say 90% good. Today was not one of those days for lunch. I cheated and had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich just because I felt like I wanted one. I wanted to be like a kid
Yeah.
today.
Sure.
But so when I control my diet and my workouts are dialed in, my sleep patterns are not an issue. Like I will fall asleep for sure. And early. I mean, I go to bed. Of course, I go to bed early now with the newborn, but like I'm 9 o'clock, I'm in bed.
Yeah. And what time are you getting up in the morning usually?
Between 4:30 and 5.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I call that the Dolly Parton.
Yeah. The 9 to
9 to
5.
5.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's amazing how the little things you don't think about now later in life, I'm like, okay, well, these are amazing that I'm able to understand these. I'd like to, what about sauna? What's your opinion on sauna? I'm fortunate enough to have a sauna at my house too. And I try to get in there like 4 or 5 days a week. And, I love it. I mean, I love sitting in that box and just sweating it out. But, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think it's great. That's again, with all of these things, when it comes to the name of the game is really a combination between mindset, relaxation, and circulation. And so like to go and sit in like 150-degree sauna, when you first get in there, you're like, oh, this is nice. It feels like you're wearing like this warmth that's almost like a blanket. And then after a few minutes, you're like, oh, it's pretty hot in here. If you bring your phone with you, your phone after a few minutes is like, I'm too hot. Like, put me aside,
Exactly.
You can't really bring your phone in,
Mm-hmm.
so it's like, you're either just sitting there chilling out or, read a book or whatever the case may be. But after a few minutes, it's hard. And it's like, you're like, wow, I'm actually starting to feel this. You think about what's actually happening. Your body has to work harder in harsh environments. So if you take a step back and you look at this again from like not just a mental toughness, but think of it like a physical toughness side of things. You're forcing your body to work harder in different environments, which is really what evolution and natural selection is. So
Wow. I never thought
consider
of it that way, but that's so true.
consider the fact that the reason why you even have the capacity to do that in the first place is because our genetic ancestors passed on those genes. How do we know? Because we're here. The ones that couldn't do that, like the people that couldn't survive harsh conditions, were dead millennium ago.
Yeah.
So you have this capacity. Most people don't understand how tough they really are. If you go and perfect example, Iron Man. Okay. So the race, the Iron Man race. Iron Man, a full Iron Man is 140 miles. A half Iron Man is 70. Okay. Back 2018, or 2017, I started training for a full. After I got a few months in, I was like, holy crap, like I'm training like 4 hours a day. 4 hours out of the day was training. And I was like, I don't, I'm a dad, I have patients, I don't have time to train 8 hours a day for a full Ironman. Right. So I pulled it back, and, accomplishing that and finishing 70 miles, it's a big feat. In the process thereof, I was thinking to myself, this is a lot. It's a lot of work to do. But the whole concept behind Ironman is not that you have to be some specialized athlete. It's that anybody can do this. And so I use the example because when folks start to realize how tough they actually are, things like cold plunges, being in hot environments, mental stress, physical stress, all these things that you know, when you look at being a human come about, there's a reason why you can handle that. And it's because those genes have been passed down through process of elimination, that our ancestors were killed off, the ones that couldn't handle that. And here you're the byproduct of all of that now, which is pretty amazing.
That's really amazing. I did this thing a couple years ago called the Goggins Challenge. You familiar with what that is?
I'm familiar with David Goggins, not the challenge.
Yeah, so you run 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours.
Oh, I've heard of this. Yeah. Uh-huh.
I turned 50 that weekend, so I decided to do 2 bonus miles because why not do 50 miles if you're going to do it?
Good for you.
Oh, man, I tell you what, sleep up. Now you understand why they keep POWs awake.
Yeah.
Because I lost, I mean, it was crazy, the journey. But now I look back and I'm like, man, that was the hardest thing I ever put myself through. But I grew so much and understood so much about myself. The first thing I understood was I never want to do it again. It's never, like, my feet still haven't recovered. Like, I still have problems sometimes with my feet, but I put myself through intentional adversity because every time I do that, I feel I get better. I level up in everything that I'm doing, whether that's being a better father. If I put myself through intentional adversity, I can handle the calm. I'm the calm in the storm. When I used to not be. I used to be such a hothead when I was in my 20s and 30s. Like, that's just who I was. But now I prepare myself by pushing myself to those limits and change the way I behave because I put myself through intentional adversity.
Exactly. Well, you've tested what your limitations are. And you said a beautiful thing when you did that challenge is the journey. So it's like, so often we get in our head, it's like the finish line, right? So you're like aiming towards the finish line with whatever the case may be, building a business, doing an actual race or an event or whatever it is. But it's the journey. This is the beautiful part, because that's when you start to actually see yourself change. I like to think it's kind of like you get introduced to yourself, to the real version of you, because when you see that adversity and it's, you have a plan until you're in it. Right? What was it, Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yes, so true.
Yeah. So it's the same thing. It's like, you have this plan and then you actually start going through with it and you're like, man, I got to think on my feet. I got to pivot and change and all those things. So it's a beautiful thing to, after you've done those types of things multiple times, you start to realize, okay, there's a journey to this. And I'm excited to see who the other version of myself is going to be on the other side of this journey.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, as I was halfway through it, I had this I'm like, I feel great. Like, it was the 8 a.m. the second day. I'm like, I'm great. I didn't bring I was bringing food with me every time I ran, just a little bit, just some calories. And I didn't bring it this time. I got 2 miles out. I had my sister-in-law with me. I took someone with me every time, just in case. You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I bottomed out. I'm a couple miles from home. I'm wobbling. I'm like, call my wife, have her bring me. At the time I was doing some liquid IV type of stuff. I need you to bring me something to drink.
Sure.
And I also had 2 glazed donuts because my body had just like shut down. Right.
Yeah.
And then I felt good. But I learned from just that, again, like I said, it was about who I became along the way, not about doing it at record timing or anything else. I'm like a Clydesdale, man. You've met me. I'm a big old 6'5" guy. I'm not built to run, but I can carry everybody with me as I go. And that challenge was just amazing to be able to push it. So we talked a little bit again before the camera started rolling. The importance of I want to talk about blood work now, like the importance of getting blood work, how often you should do it, and what are some markers or some indicators that should look at that are kind of outside the box on what we normally think we should test for.
So let's start with the how often do you think you should do it? Because the answer is going to be, it depends. I think it depends both on the age of the person, is also what they have going on just in their health. And then lastly, what it is that they're trying to accomplish. So I think for most folks, and I'm generalizing big time, but for most folks under age 35, for example, I think, doing it once a year is probably okay. And that's the asterisks on that is, if there's health problems, known health problems, if they have issues going on, if they're training for an event or something, then that's different, but most folks, Generally, 35 and under, otherwise healthy, once a year, I think is okay. And we'll talk about what that looks like. For folks that 35 and above, you know, asterisk on that is probably twice a year. You know, and I say probably because once you start getting into 40s, man, it's just there's something about the human body when you turn 40. It's just things change. Things start to change. They start to change way quicker than you think. More so for men in their 40s. For women, that's more so in their 50s when they get there. But guys, we start changing very quickly, not in a great way, mind you. So if you look at, for example, testosterone levels really start to drop by the time we're hitting our mid 30s. What's incredibly interesting, and you know, medicine doesn't have an answer for this, but guys are being diagnosed with lower and lower testosterone early and earlier on. And there's a ton of theories as to why, whether it's our food supply chain, is it radiation, is it testicular injuries, was it hormones in milk and meat that we ate growing up? Nobody really knows. There's a bunch of theories, or it could actually be that we're actually seeing a little bit of genetic evolutionary change that's occurring. So bottom line is like you don't know unless you look, and so knowing your numbers is really a key thing, I think, throughout every stage of life once you get out of childhood. For guys in their 40s, which is, I take care of both men and women, but the majority of the patients I would say that I have are men that are 40 and up, that are mostly alpha type A entrepreneurial folks that have gone to create some pretty big stuff. For those folks, we check labs every 90 days, and the reason why I'm checking every quarter is I want nice, boring lab work. You don't want to be an exotic patient. You want things that are boring. And so if you're checking with regular frequency, every quarter, just like if you have a business that you're looking to see, okay, where are we at this quarter? Things are a little off. Okay, what changes do we need to make? If you do that every quarter, then there's not really a big surprise when you're getting towards the end of the year. And so it's a lot easier to make small adjustments than to have to try to swing things, a different direction. It's like turning a battleship. If you make small incremental change, that's one thing versus, you can't turn a battleship fast. You can't stop an 18-wheeler quickly, or whatever scenario you want to consider. So then the next logical question is like, okay, well, what do you check? For men and women, it's a little bit different. For both of them, we're always checking things like a blood count, a CBC. This allows someone to look to see what the white blood cell count looks like, red blood cells, the concentration of the cells. It also takes measurements of cells. So when you consider things like leukemias, lymphomas, things like that, you can sometimes, not always, sometimes pick up on those things relatively early if you're starting to see change. And you also consider if you're doing this in a quarterly fashion, you can start to see that change. You're getting data points. So those, just like with your Aura ring that you have, you're seeing daily data points. Well, when it comes to blood labs, if you're doing quarterly data points, it tells a story when you zoom out and you kind of look and see the trend on these things. So we're checking things like CBC, a CMP, which is a metabolic panel that looks at all of the electrolytes. It also looks at organ function, so kidney, liver, etc. We're checking things like hormones. So you're looking at, for both men and women, you're looking at testosterone, free testosterone, estrogen. For women, you're also looking at progesterone. For both, you're looking at luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone, which tells us a story with fertility. But the interesting thing with hormones is your body's always trying to stay in balance. So if something's out of balance in one hormone, you'll usually see it, maybe not initially, but after a period of time, other hormones start getting thrown off a bit. And particularly as we age, that happens more and more commonly. And then last but not least is, I should add IGF-1. So that's insulin-like growth factor. That gives us an idea of really what someone's growth hormone level is doing. Of course, growth hormone, especially as we age, we're not really growing anymore. But in terms of like bouncing back from recovery and things like that, it really tells us a story. And then lipids. So before we got started, we were talking a little bit about lipids, and and subparticles and things like that. Interesting thing is, like, even when I first went through my medical training, the training was good cholesterol and bad cholesterol, and that's not really true. It's not good nor bad. It's just cholesterol. There's a lot of stuff that you see on social media where it talks about, like, don't lower your cholesterol, because if you lower your cholesterol, that's what cells are made out of, and now you can't make as many cells, which is one of the stupidest things I've ever heard in my life. It's a ton of misinformation that's out there. So when you consider that cholesterol, there is some portion that comes from our diet. It's not as much as folks think, and you usually have to have a fairly extreme diet to even influence it. Carnivores and things like that, folks that are on these diet trends, a lot of times you'll see higher levels of some of the cholesterol markers, as well as triglycerides, which are basically small particles of fat in the bloodstream. But really, what it comes down to with cholesterol is the size of the particle, and it makes sense if you think about it. The smaller the particle, the more places it can cram itself. So when you're starting to think about, like, the really small end, like arterioles, which is a thin wall of an artery in the brain, in the coronary vessels of the heart, even in your fingertips. If you can test this, you can literally just pinch your finger until it goes white, and then you let go. And that's the capillary refill, which that time should be about less than a second. 1 to 2 seconds is normal. When you start thinking about those really small blood vessels, then this starts to make sense, because you go, okay, wait a minute. Really small particles of fat, essentially, can transcend into the wall of these arteries. And this happens via these things called lipoproteins, which are basically, it's a transporter that will take the fat in the bloodstream and bring it into the wall. When it transcends enough times, you can start having the lumen, or the essentially what's the hole of the artery, start to close down over time. Or you can have it where it sits there long enough where it starts to harden. And when it hardens like that, blood pressure changes that occur, and it's normal to have blood pressure changes, can actually cause a tear in the wall of the artery, and it'll bleed a little bit, just like when you cut your finger. And so now, as fat is going by, now it adheres to it. It gets stuck. And this process of atherosclerosis, of this narrowing, just occurs more and more and more. That it's the most common way in the United States that we die. It's the number one killer. So it's a good conversation to have, and it's good for folks to actually understand how this all works. So those are the labs we check on a quarterly basis. Is we're at least looking at those things. Of course, it's a little bit different for each individual is different, so we want to be precise for each person and treat them appropriately. But having that framework, I think, can really make a big difference for folks.
Yeah, I have mine checked every 90 days. And we monitor my testosterone, because I am a 51-year-old man who's on testosterone replacement therapy. I do that. I've done that for probably 10 years now. And we monitor it, and keep a good eye on it and keep close. My dad died from a stroke. My grandfather died from a stroke. So I'm really cognizant of trying to understand what blood work looks like. And I've had the calcium scan, and my score was almost 0. So
good.
And then we did the carotids, and there was maybe a tiny piece in there. So those are all good indicators. At least I felt confident, since my dad died at 68 years old. So I felt confident from that piece, but I want to know more about it. That's why I was so excited about having you on here. I want to know more about that and study it more and make sure that I'm doing all the right things so that I can teach my son and my daughters to do the right things as well. And when you talked about that, making it, the DNA stronger, that's what we're doing essentially, is we're changing it, right? We're changing the DNA and the structure and the thought process behind what it takes to be healthy. Eating salads for every meal is not necessarily the healthy way to do things, and I really geek out about that stuff. And I'm amazed. I know several of the people that are your patients. Some of them are friends of mine, and I've watched them evolve and change, and it's been amazing. And I need to make that commitment myself to change and evolve on that same level. What else is going on in your world right now? I know that when we met, you were doing something a little bit differently than you are right now. I'd love to hear what you've got going on and share more about that. I'm a fan of the 10X community. I've known Grant Cardone since 1994. I go back that far with Grant, which is crazy,
Wow, that's awesome.
because I sold cars for a living, right? And Grant was
Yeah,
the man then, and it's amazing to see what he's done now. But can we talk about your involvement with 10X, but also just what's the path right now? What are we working on?
yeah. So I'll tell you a little bit about kind of where I came and where I came from, and it'll make sense for now. So um, uh, up until around the time of right when COVID hit, I was a hospital doctor. So I was taking care of folks in the hospital, and a hospitalist, for your viewers that don't know, it's basically a doctor that takes care of folks in the hospital. They'll admit patients from the emergency room, take care of them on the general medical wards, as well as intensive care unit and so forth, as well as run all the codes, the code blues and things like that happen. So stressful job. And then when COVID hit, it just, amplified that. And the gift that was in it for me was, I was like, you know what, the medical system this doesn't work. Like, this is ridiculous the way this works. It's like, and nobody was happy. Patients were frustrated, like, everyone, nursing staff, administrators, and then, my folks, the physicians, were really disgusted by it. And I remember having a conversation. I was having lunch with another physician who had kids, and I asked him, I said, do you think your kids are going to go into medicine? And he was like, hell no. Like, they have no interest whatsoever. And it kind of broke my heart a little bit, So I went and I asked my daughters, I'm like, hey, would either one of you want to be a doctor? They were like, no. I was like, well, why? They're like, Dad, like, we see how you work. And, it's like they don't want that. So it's not an if, there will be a problem. There's already a doctor shortage that's going on. It is just going to get worse. People, they're trying to, like, fill the cracks. You've, like, it's something, you have all these folks that, like, everybody wants to be a doctor. They'll put doctor in front of their name, or they'll, speak like they know what they're talking about and this and that. Everybody wants to be a doctor until it's a shit show. It's like, all of a sudden, when it's an emergency or when something happens, people scatter. Because most folks who talk big they never know what it's like to have to make a life or death decision for somebody else and have the ramifications. If you're wrong, your career is done. Like, your livelihood is gone. So you want to talk about pressure. Most folks they can't even comprehend the amount of pressure that you have to handle being a physician. And so I decided after I was working in the hospital, I was like, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I love medicine. It's part of me. It's my calling. But I was like, I either have to walk away from medicine and go do something else, or I need to figure out a way to do it the way I think it should be done. And that's when I started down this entrepreneurial road and fell on my face over and over and over again. Like, I had no idea what I was doing, no business training at all. But in the process thereof, I learned some really important lessons. And that is, the biggest one is fail forward. So one of my friends and patients is that a guy named Rick Steele. And Rick owns a pretty big company. It's called Select Blinds. They're one of the largest DIY home blind solutions that there is. It's a Select Blind right there. And he gave me that advice. He said, fail forward. He's like, each time, he's like, you'll never actually fail if you learn, So either you win or you learn. And so each one of these individuals that I had, that have continued to have as a patient, entrepreneurs, they're always interested in what the other person's business looks like. Just the curiosity of it. So I would get these little pearls of wisdom each time, and I started stacking these things. And in the process thereof, ended up inadvertently building this practice that's absolutely amazing, that now I take care of, some of the biggest entrepreneurs in the world. And this is over a course of 5 years. So it's really, I'm incredibly blessed and really happy about it. And that's what's led to this next iteration and my partnership with 10X. Is I attracted a patient named Brandon Dawson. He's partners with Grant Cardone. And Brandon is an absolutely amazing individual. He's one of the most brilliant business people I've ever met. And we were talking one day, and we were just talking about kind of the state of healthcare in the United States. And in the process thereof, I said, I'd really like to be able to help doctors, help physicians, step away from the general medical model. Because as it stands right now, it's like if you're a doctor, there's some things that you can do that are cash pay. So if you're in like cosmetics, plastic surgery, etc., concierge to some degree. Concierge typically usually means you take insurance and then you charge like a cash retainer as well. But the problem is medical insurance companies, big pharma, they have their hand in so much and they control so much of people's healthcare that the way I see it is the only way to actually truly have healthcare as your own is you have to step away from all that shit and it has to be private. And so that's what we started with 10X, the 10X Private Physician, which essentially is an opportunity for medical doctors to step in and say, okay, like I'm going to get away from that model. And instead, I'm going to start this cash-based practice that, if you follow the model and just do what I've lined out and everything, there's no reason why you can't make $1, $2, $3 million a year as a physician while still being able to have time with your family, have time for yourself, and provide really amazing patient care with a very small number of patients. And so on the patient side of things, the folks that you're attracting, there's folks that are more affluent that don't ever want to go and spend time sitting in a clinic or something. You think somebody like Grant Cardone is going to go spend 3 hours in a waiting room?
No,
Of course not.
no.
So for guys like him, what's the alternative? To go without medical care? So it's like there's folks on his level and similar individuals that they need this. So there's a demand that's there for it right now. And the way I think of it is just kind of like when Elon Musk started Tesla, he didn't start selling a $35,000 car. He started selling, this Roadster that was, a couple $100,000, and then built enough of a network and a name that eventually was able to, have multiple levels. That's what I foresee with this, is that we start a program where we get the physicians, first of all, kind of get them out of the normal system that sucks and build a new system. And then, you start by taking care of, wealthy, affluent folks, and then have multiple tiers down to eventually allow everyone to step into a private model. Because the reality of the situation, man, is like healthcare is not going to get any better. It's only going to get worse. Is this going to be some giant revolutionary change in healthcare? No, I don't think so. Will it provide an option that doesn't exist yet, where maybe the top 1 to 2 to 3% of people will take advantage of? Absolutely. And those are the same individuals that they have big businesses. So if you take care of, this is a way to make change overall. If you take care of the CEO that's running the company, the guy who owns the company and so forth, you take care of those individuals, you improve their health, you get them on the right track. It transcends down to all the employees and everything that they take care of. So this is my way of actually providing a solution that otherwise wouldn't be there.
I love that. Who's your ideal doctor you want to partner with right now? Like, is it somebody new out of medical school, somebody that's been practicing for 20 years? I mean, what does that look like?
I think both, actually, because you get the pros and the cons of both. For someone who is like just out of residency, they're up to date on all this new information and everything. They're young, they're vivacious, they're hungry, they want to make something happen. They're also somewhat moldable because they've been trained. Even in residency, you're trained in the insurance and big pharma model. So they're young enough you can go and you can say, okay, listen, there's a better way. Let us show it to you. On the flip side, for the person that's been out in practice for 20 something years, they're frustrated. They're done. They said enough is enough. I'm sick and tired of this shit. Those are the people that they have enough reps under their belt where you could be like, hey, listen, I know your pain points. And that was me. I've been a physician for 20 years. So it's like, I know the pain points and I know where you're at. Come over here and let us show you there's this whole other way to go about doing things. So it's both sides of the equation. And I think, I have a link I can share with you. We have a link that's just an interest page right now. We've already got about 100 people on there, that are saying, hey, I consider me for this and let's see if we're a fit.
I have a couple personal friends that I'll put you in touch with that I know their frustration because we talk all the time, right? What's your take as we wrap this up? What about how would you? Is there a space? Is there in this space? Is there a spot for nurse practitioners and physician assistants to do something similar?
Absolutely. There's interesting. It depends on what state someone's in. There's different legalities of like whether a nurse practitioner can go open a practice in that state
Right.
or what have you. It's usually states that have a smaller number of physicians. So they usually the rules are a little bit different. Places usually like Florida, California, etc., where there's just high populations, it's usually rules are a little bit different. But so it would vary. But bottom line is yes. The reality of the situation is there's not enough medical professionals out there for the number of people that we have. So I think, and what I'm passionate about is the more brilliant medical minds that we can get away from big pharma and big insurance, and show them that it's like, hey, listen, there's a cash-based option that's there. And then you pair that with the population of folks that is, most folks are kind of in this mentality that they're kind of trapped in the matrix, if you will, where it's like, well, as part of my job, I get money taken out of my paycheck for health insurance. So why would I go and pay for private medical care as well? The reality of the situation is this: is that most people want to spend pennies on prevention, but in the end, they would give their life savings for the cure. And this is the reason why, if you've never been to a cancer center, if you go and you go to a major cancer center, you drive behind it, you're going to see RV hookups behind the cancer center. Almost all of them have them. Why? Because people sell everything that they have to go buy an RV and park it behind the cancer center and just walk back and forth to get their chemo and everything. When the reality of the situation is if you do really high quality preventative care, which we do not do in the US, but if you go and you do it privately, there's no red tape. There's no insurance company to tell you no, because you're investing in your health. When you go and you do that type of thing, you can actually live a really, really long life. Last point I'll make, I want you to consider this. You look at past presidents. Like, it's not that they're genetically superior. Most past presidents of the United States lived to be in their 90s. Why? It's because they have access to a level of healthcare that most people do not have access to. Because most people are playing this insurance game. Well, when you stop playing the insurance game, guess what? You have access to all that stuff. So there's a mental shift with our population that has to change. And that change starts at the top and it will matriculate down. You're on Instagram, you're seeing people with the Lambos and the $100,000 watches and all that and everything. You start seeing them say, hey, I invest in my healthcare. My health is wealth. I invest in me. You see it enough times, folks will start getting it. We'll start making some changes and everything. And I think we do that, we're going to sit a whole lot better as a society and get America back to the place where it's supposed to be at the top.
Man, I cannot wait to get this out to people. And I've been waiting for this conversation since the first time we sat down and shared dinner together at that event in Dallas.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to be able to get it out. If I'm someone who wants to know more about this and look at what it takes to get into that private sector, as far as for my health, what do I need to do? What's the first step I should make to try to figure this, to start making these moves?
Well, I'd say first and foremost, I speak a lot about this type of thing. So follow me on Instagram at David Boyd MD. That would be step number one. And on there, I have a link that has links and everything on there. The next thing that I would add to that is if someone's is a physician, if you're an MD or a DO that's board certified, that you're saying, enough is enough. There's a link on the page that'll lead to that interest list for the 10X private physician. Of course, I'll share that with you, Chris, so you can put it on all your stuff also. And then as far as for my private practice, I'm not taking on any more patients right now, but 10X Health is a great option, and it's the way that I've come on board with them as one of their medical directors and help kind of guide things so that it's with what they're doing now. It's a beautiful thing, because you start with genetics, you move into labs, Supplements certainly play a role with all of that also. But when folks start paying attention to their health, that's when things in their life start to change. And that's what's really exciting, because that's when we can actually make a big impact as a society.
Yep. Man, I thank you so much for making the time to get on here today. And I can't wait to share this. And I'm sorry we're going to miss each other when I'm in Arizona here in a few days, but I'm sure we'll
Yeah,
connect
me
again
too. It's
soon.
all right. We will find a time to catch up in person. I appreciate. Thank you so much for having me on here, man. And congratulations with your book.
Thank you.
I'm so proud of you and everything that you're making happen.
I appreciate that, man. It means the world to me. Thank you for tuning into the One Hand at a Time podcast. Please make sure you like and share the episode. And we'll see you next time here at the One Hand at a Time podcast. Make it a great day.